Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Employment Committee. Turning first to agenda item 1, which is the appointment of chairman. I believe that Mr. Brecon was nominated chairman-elect at the council meeting held on 17th of May 2023. Can I ask the committee for a formal nomination, please? And a seconder?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Mr. Brecon.
Thank you, Damien. Can I welcome everyone to the first meeting in this municipal year of the Employment Committee. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. The link is available on the council's website. We do have Colin who's dialing in this morning. So good morning, Colin. We'll hear from him later on one of the reports. Morning. Can I ask that all members and officers have their microphones on mute until they wish to speak or are invited to speak, and that officers on Teams show their camera only when presenting their reports. Please ensure that mobile phones are switched to silent. I have received apologies today from Mr. Pendleton, and thank you to Mrs. Brenda Seaton for substituting today. Welcome, Brenda. Item 2 on the agenda is the election of Deputy Chairman. Can I seek nominations for the position of Deputy Chairman?
Nominate Mr. Bedford.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you, Bertie. Congratulations, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item 3 is, firstly, we need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February 2023. These are on pages 3 to 8 of your agenda pack. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February be taken as read, confirmed and signed. Can I have a seconder for those, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, those are seconded. I'll sign those after the meeting. Thank you. Item 4 is question time. I can confirm I've received no questions from members of the public. Item 5, questions asked by members under standing orders 7.3 and 7.5. I have received no questions from members. Item 6, to advise of any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. I can confirm there are no urgent items. Item 7, declarations of interest in respect to items on the agenda. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on the agenda they wish to raise? Richard?
Yes, I'm advised that I should declare interest as a member of the EMSS Joint Committee, or I needn't leave the room apparently.
Okay, and I have to make that same declaration as well. So, yeah, okay, thank you. That's related to Damien's report at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35, agenda item 8. There are no petitions. So our first report on today's agenda at item 9 is the attendance management on pages 9 to 14 of your agenda packs. Andrea Denham is here and will present the report. So Andrea, good morning. Over to yourself.
Thank you. The purpose of the report is to update the Employment Committee on the Council's overall position on sickness absence at the end of March 23, which is Q4 22-23. As background, the committee last received a report in February, and that was the Q2 position for 22-23. So this is giving the Q3 position, which you haven't seen before, as well as the end of year position Q4, which is at the table, on the table at the bottom of page 9, and also gives the total FTE days lost for the 12-month period at the end of the year, the 12-month period, and also the total cost for that period as well. Across the page onto page 10, just some commentary. The Chief Exec's Department and the Public Health Department were below the 7.5 council target of 7.5 days per FTE at the end of the year, and the council's overall total was 9.25 days lost. That had been the same for Q3 as well, so we'd maintained a position over Q3 and Q4. Obviously, looking at that position, we've still got work to continue and to progress in terms of working towards our target of 7.5 days per FTE. Moving on to point 9, reasons for sickness absence. You'll see that these are our top 10 reasons for losing time due to sickness absence, as well as not disclosed category. As we have continued, the stress, depression, mental health category continues to be the highest reason for absence. Obviously, the Q3 and Q4 columns are new information for the committee. We came down for Q3 and it's gone up slightly for Q4, but compared to the Q2 position that was brought to you previously, we are moving in an improved position. Also, we discussed the not disclosed category, and I'd explained that we were going to continue to remind managers to try and push to improve that category, to try and collate more information from individuals and to get the records onto the system to improve our understanding and our analysis of data, and we'll continue to do that going forward to reduce that not disclosed percentage and to bring that down as far as we can. Over onto page 11. As requested in February, I was asked if I could look through some previous records, which I've done, to produce a trending line. So looking at end of year positions. So obviously we do have some fluctuations within the year, but I decided to present end of year positions so we could give a good reference point. As you will see, I think the highest point was at 10.08. That was 1920, and 2021 was down to 7.51, almost at that 7.5 target. The beginning line where this period starts was 9.22 and we're now at 9.27. I know that my involvement with this project started in 16-17 as a reference point, and this is obviously over an 11-year period I've been able to gain this data from my records. Moving on to table 13, the long and short term absence split in terms of how we usually see this across the majority of departments. There's usually more of a balance of long term absence than short term absence. We know this from our casework as well. It's sometimes different in the chief executive's department, and that's how it's presented for this period. This is a representative of how we usually see the split. And moving on to page 12 is a breakdown into the more detailed levels of each of the departments, and you've got the Q3 and the Q4, which are new pieces of information for the committee that you haven't seen since the Q2. But you've got the end of year quarters for 4 years and plus the last 4 quarters for last year. So moving on to page 13, recommendations are for the committee to note the update on the position at the end of the financial year, which is at the end of March 22. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm one of the longest or the longest member on this committee. So what I'm going to say now really applies to me more than anybody else. And that is, and thank you, Andrew, by the way, for your report and for the long-term trend. And we can see on the long-term trend, apart from the unusual, of course, 2021 year, I have to say, for all the reports we receive and discussions we have over many years now, in my case, we don't honestly seem to make very much difference. And I wonder really, when I'm feeling most miserable about it, I think, Richard, what value are you adding by sitting here, these committee meetings, getting these statistics all the time, when frankly, nothing profound seems to happen, apart, I say, from that extraordinary year of 2021. So sorry, Chairman, that's a very gloomy remark on a nice spring sunny day, but I just feel almost quite despairing about it. What do we need to do to make any real difference?
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
End of Mr. Gloom.
There's a challenging question for someone to answer. So, Andrea, Gordon.
Shall I come in first? I mean, I can't disagree with anything you've said because the facts are there. And I think it's a source of frustration for us as well. We have a notional target of 7.5 days that was picked a number of years ago, has never been changed, no reason to change that. We talked about that, I think, in the previous meeting. We have tried lots of different things, lots of initiatives, and we brought lots of initiatives to this committee over the years. At the end of the day, it is nothing but hard work and perseverance by managers supported by HR that helps us manage cases. One thing we are seeing is a little bit of a shift in some departments from short term to long term. So again, that's an example of the advisors, the HR advisors, sorry, will just make sure that the focus is right and the focus changes. I suppose we have this as a standing item at every committee, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't. And actually, if there was more movement, I'd probably argue that you wouldn't see much movement in each quarter between meetings. But obviously, what you're taking is a much longer term view. The only thing I'd add is that we've agreed with CMT that we will do something that we're going to do just as COVID struck, which is a kind of communication and engagement piece to really start to get some strong, robust but fair messages out about how important it is to manage sickness absence, the support we put in place. If I'm blunt, our expectations of people attending work, unless they really can't, it's a kind of, it doesn't get said, but it's a core expectation. But get communications team to support us with a bit of a campaign, if you like. So we're due to take something back to CMT just to agree something that's proportionate, and then I'm sure we can share that at a future committee. But you'll see things go out anyway. Andrea, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Thank you. And I would echo the hard work. I think that over this long period of time, I think the hard work has been in different areas. I think you can probably look across that period of time and you can see all of the different things that have happened in the community, in the council. We've had financial challenges, we've had health challenges. We know that at the moment the NHS is having challenges in terms of managing waiting lists still. We have people that are now starting to get treatment that has been delayed. So now we're starting to see, in terms of our caseload, people starting to go in for operations that have been delayed. So we have to constantly make sure that we refresh and we review what we are doing. We know that we've done lots of work around mental health, but we can never stand still. We always have to keep looking at how we manage attendance, but it is very much about how we work on individual cases and how we make sure that our manager cohort has the fresh skills, because our managers change all the time, and that we make sure that they are focused and on this, and that this keeps high on their agenda, because as soon as we look away from it, that's where we end up having issues with attendance. How do we really push those figures downwards? We need lots of things to go in our favour. We need a positive health environment. We need to continue to drive our managers to focus on this as a priority. We need this to stay as a priority for the council as well.
Okay, Gordon, you just wanted to come back?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things, just kind of looking a bit wider outside the authority. A few years ago, we had an informal peer review from colleagues in North Yorkshire when we brought the results to Employment Committee, and that certainly showed us that we were doing all the right things. That they had particularly low levels of absence at that point. Excuse me, but it certainly showed at that point we were doing the right things. I think it was the last meeting and the meeting before where we presented some county and unitary figures. Kent was pointed out as being considerably lower than us. I had a conversation with a counterpart in Kent who confirmed that it is just hard work. There was no silver bullet, nothing in particular that they were doing that was creating lower sickness absence. And I think in general, again, post-COVID, what we've seen in other authorities is the same as us, and this is not excuses, it's just patterns, that sickness absence has gone back up since COVID. So the patterns for others are the same, so therefore the challenges are the same. So just wanted to sort of broaden it out for a second.
Okay, it's good. So I've had a few hands up. Does anyone want to pick up on this point at the moment? Because I've also got Peter and Barry want to raise a question. Was it on this? Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted, because I'm a new girl to this, I wanted to know whether our processes are particularly lenient or are they robust? Do the processes of treating absences, does that need to be addressed at all, or are we up to legal limits, and if we try any harder that we will go on to illegal ways of managing it?
So I'm Caroline Fairchild, I'm Head of People Services. This falls completely into my lap. So what I can give real assurance of is the fact that our processes, our policies and procedures are exceptionally robust. Obviously, we have to follow legislation. We do take advice and guidance from our legal services colleagues when necessary, because we do have a number of highly complex issues and facts to face in some of these cases. And certainly during my time, I have seen a number of iterations of the sickness absence policy. And on each and every occasion, we have upped, if you like, the criteria to be such that this is the process that will be followed should you have short-term frequent absences that reach a particular level, or should you be on long-term absence. So it's very, very clear in the policy that as a starting point, as a good organisation, as a good employer, we will, of course, support you through a period of sickness absence, but equally within the policy on your part, you are required to seek GP's assistance. You are required to do everything you have to do on your part in order to return to work at that soonest possible opportunity. So within that, there are trigger points. So if somebody remains to be absent, we bring them in for a formal interview, if you like, if I can call it that. And ultimately, yes, somebody can be dismissed. We don't have a great number of dismissals because they don't actually reach that point. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Andrea? But as an organisation, we do have the policy that allows us to dismiss. In addition, just to mention the role of our performance advisors. So we do have a number of people within my service whose job it is to work directly with managers to advise and support on the whole issue of performance management. And that can be sickness absence, it can be capability, it could be they're failing their probation, if you like. And again, those individuals I know work really hard with those managers to make sure the right actions are taken. So hopefully that gives you some assurance.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few points that may dart around the room a little bit, so I'll just go through them. The first on the first page of the report, I've got concerns about environment and transport, where there seems to be a progressive decline in performance there in terms of the number of sick days or absence leave, and what interventions are being put in place there with that directorate to ensure that position improves. That's just, if I leave that for a second, that's my first point. The second point is on the second page, paragraph 9. I think you alluded to it earlier around the not disclosed point. Just a bit more about that. I think certainly, I mean, I work in the private sector. If I didn't disclose why I was absent from work, that wouldn't go down very well and I wouldn't last very long. So I'm wondering why we allow that and what we're doing to address that. In the same page, obviously, our target is 7.5 days. I think the private sector's average sick days is about 6 days a year. We're coming in at 9.27, which is, again, significantly worse than the private sector. I just wondered what your views on that was and how we can bring that down to ensure that obviously we're getting value for money from our employees. Really like the trend analysis on paragraph 12. That's really helpful. So it's good to see, you know, I mean, Richard mentioned, you know, in terms of over the last 10 years, it looks basically flatlined, but it's good to see the kind of trends and see, you know, I mean, we've seen COVID in there, so we know that was a big impact on that. But essentially, our position has pretty much stayed plateaued over the last 10 years. On paragraph 13, you've got the long term and the short term sicknesses, and you've got the individual occurrences. I just wondered in terms of what our policy is. So I know some employers will not pay will only pay statutory sick leave if they're off for say 1 or 2 days. I know some private sector employers require you to be off say 3 or 4 days to stop people taking the odd 1 day here, 1 day there, the sick leave, because the incentive is then, you know, that you actually, you know, you don't do that to take advantage of the system. So I wonder what our policy was on that, and if that was being looked at as well to ensure that, you know, those small pockets of 1 day here, 1 day there, that almost some people might see as additional annual leave, isn't being taken advantage of. But I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
I'm going to start off with answering the question about E&T. It's quite interesting, actually, because one of our colleagues has joined us in the office today, who is the HR business partner for Environment and Transport. And I think it's fair to say when we produced these figures, she most certainly faced a number of questions from her department management team as to why the figure had grown in the way it has. What we've done in respect of E&T, we've done a deep dive in terms of looking underneath the figures in a lot more detail. And what's happened in Environment and Transport basically is there's been a number of long-term cases that skewed overall the absence figure. What we've also done is we've identified those cases, and we've had conversations with the performance advisors whom I mentioned earlier to contact those managers and to do some real detailed specific work with them on those cases, because they are long term, and from our point of view, yes, they have been attended to, but they need more attention. So that's where we are with Environment and Transport, but it's really just to let you know that in terms of that top line figure, if something does look to be out of kilter, if you like, with the general trend, then Andrea, in her role, most certainly picks it up in the first instance. Then she talks to the relevant business partner. And to be absolutely honest, E&T, as a department, most certainly from our conversations with them, want to target this and bring sickness absence down. So we've had real good conversations with Anne Carruthers, the director, and her assistant directors as well. So that's what's happened in E&T. Do you want to talk about the non-disclosed issue, Andrea?
Yes. So in terms of the non-disclosed category, legally, we have to have a facility for people to be able to report absence for the first 5 days, and then after the first 5 days they provide a note from their medic, which will provide a reason. I think the reason that we get not disclosed is not that people are saying, I will not tell you why I'm sick. I think it is to do with the manager not capturing it and getting it into the system. And I think also we have some areas of the business where we have a central timekeeper administration function, and they are not transposing that information into the system. So I think it is more of an administration issue than it is a refusing to give information system, which is why it's something that we can do work on. I'm sure there are some instances, but so it's not a category I can remove. I think there are also some situations where people will report. We sometimes have an issue where someone will report an illness or a condition, and the manager just doesn't know what category to put it in. If they call through to HR, we'll advise them what category to put it in, but they just don't recognise it. So they'll put it under non-disclosed just to get it onto the system. I'd rather they got it onto the system, but obviously then that leaves us with that. So it's an administrative issue rather than a refusing to cooperate, is my experience.
Good. You were right. We'll dot around. I'll pick up the third bit. You were right. If I can just pick up the bit around targets, private sector, and then the kind of policy side of it. I think we've been aware for a number of years that the private sector, which is obviously very broad, but generally runs a lot lower. The sickness entitlement in terms of excuse me, 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay is a national condition service. Technically, it can't be varied locally. Some have done, very few have done in the past, and some have reversed that. So some have reduced to lower than 6 months full, 6 months half. And those that did it, perhaps at the start of austerity, when they looked at terms and conditions, so I can't name any, but some I think have put it back up again. So it's very much seen as an insurance policy, but it's not about saying somebody can be off 6 months and then another 6 months. It's about us managing the cases within that period, and we have very few people who go over the 6 months and into half pay. Kind of handful of people really. We have looked in the past at an officer level quite extensively. I can't remember whether any of the conversations came to employment committee or not around whether we should reduce 6 months full, 6 months half, and have a different model. And we did also look at the point you just made around should we not pay, the first day, 2 days, 3 days, etc. And we did quite extensive work in terms of the pros and cons of that. And as you can see, because we've still got it, for obvious reasons, we decided not to pursue those. We sort of weighed up the pros and cons. And as I say, when you look across at other authorities and bear in mind some of the recruitment and retention challenges we have, I don't know of any who are actively looking at this as a way of reducing sickness absence. And I think if we were to dilute some of our core terms and conditions at a point where recruitment and retention is extremely difficult in some areas, that could have a different, different unintended consequences, if you like.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'd probably more comfortable with the policy position on that, in terms of not, our position is that we will just pay full pay essentially. If someone has the odd day off work, they still get the full day's pay. That's my understanding. If there was a performance management behind that, I know that in the NHS, certainly nurses, if they have X amount of repeated incidents in 6 months, say they have three short incidents, they're then put on performance review. They have to then justify why they've had the recurring levels of sickness in that 6 month period. Have we got any kind of performance management like that to ensure that we don't have employees taking advantage of the system?
We have. Absolutely. Andrew will know probably more about the detail, but it's the same. It's the trigger points that, you can't have a series of sickness absences every so many weeks and not be spoken to, not be challenged, because actually underneath that absence could be something quite serious that we need to know about as an employer. There might be something we can actually assist that employee with, from a health and wellbeing, mental health, other support mechanism, and that's really important to us as the employer. But most certainly what then happens is they could find themselves on a formal plan. And again, as mentioned earlier, that formal plan then goes through various stages, and somebody could end up being dismissed from their job for absence. And it is very, very clear in the policy that is spelt out, those expectations. And very helpfully, we work with the trade unions on these difficult cases. They're very, very supportive of us. They know the direction that we need to take. And I know also that they're having the right conversations with their members about attendance, because twice a year we have an annual conference with our trade union colleagues, and actually at that annual conference with our trade union colleagues, absence management, attendance management is now a bit of a standing agenda item, because it's one of those areas we absolutely still want to work very closely with the trade unions on to make those improvements, because they are also acutely aware that we're not meeting our targets.
Okay, I think just before, oh, go on, Andrew. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to add an extra point to this. In terms of our trigger points, so if anyone is interested, I can provide them with the attendance management policy, which details each of the triggers. That's absolutely easy for me to provide. And there are a number of different combinations of triggers. The main one is the 3 and 6 months, exactly as you described the NHS, but we also have some other combinations of triggers. I think the key to attendance management is consistency of application. And we know this in terms of keeping ourselves legal, compliant, and also really effective attendance management comes from that. So actually supported by senior officers and also by employment committee, projects from this committee, which I've headed up in the past, we've put in place the performance management advisors, but also we have a HR coordinator who is focused on the compliance of those plans. So what that role actually does is focuses on identifying who's actually triggered throughout the organisation and following up with managers to make sure that they're actually doing all of those pieces of work and tracking them. And where we have managers that maybe haven't followed up on those pieces of work, escalating those to more senior managers until they are done. And that's actually a real key part of attendance management, making sure the work actually happens, and bringing that policy to life. Thank you.
Okay, I think, yeah, if you could certainly provide members with the attendance management policy, that'd be good. Not too sure whether Brenda would like a copy or is sitting with us today, but she'd be more than welcome. So yeah, it'd be certainly good if you could circulate to members. Just before I go to Barry, it's interesting. I mean, they're non-disclosed. Out of 44,000 days, it's 2,200. So I think it is just tightening up the rigour with managers that when they complete their forms, that's unacceptable. So it's, yeah, I agree with Peter's point. So thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to pick up on that one as well, because the fact is at 5.8%, it's more than half of these in front of us. The non-disclosed is higher, you know, the neurological, cancer, etc., etc. So it's certainly something we need to draw down on. As you say, it's something we can work on, but with 18 months of figures in front of us, the figure hasn't really changed in that 18 months. And it really is just a case of going back to those managers when they put something through non-disclosed, push it back to them and say, no, would it come through with something? If it's that simple that they're not doing their job, it must be pushed back until they do come. If we're a little bit lax and people have got to that thing, oh, I can't quite know where that goes, I'll just put it non-disclosed. They keep getting away with that, they're going to keep doing it. And the fact that it's a higher figure than more than half of the things are in front of us, I think it needs looking at. I really understand where Richard's coming from. I've sat on this for 2 years now, and every time we have this in front of us, we pretty much ask the same questions, and we pretty much get the same answers, because we're dealing with something that we don't have a lot of control over. People get poorly, some people swing the lead, most people are genuine. You're trying to sift out between the two. It's a very difficult subject. It's hard to accuse someone that they're not, you know, pulling their weight, etc. So I understand how difficult that is. But what we could look at is the things that we could personally have an impact on. So out of all of these on page 10, the stress, depression, mental health, musculoskeletal and back and neck. There are 3 areas which you could actually have suffered those problems here. How you're sitting, how you're working, etc., and the stress and depression. And I think I might have raised this before, but what we haven't done is split that stress, depression, mental health out to what's us and what people suffering. I think we spoke last time, bereavement and things like that are reasons for it. But if there are reasons in there that it's because of us, that's something we could have an impact on. And I think if we were to dig down into that more, because it's such a high percentage at 26.2%, I think if we were to be looking into that, and I'm thinking of report 2 that we're on to next, which is health and well-being, and again, looking at that, in theory, the more that comes online, the more we're doing with that number at the top of 26.2 should go down, because that's something we can work on. But I just kind of think if out 26.2, if 10% of that was down to stress at work, that's something we could work on. That's something we could action. So I kind of feel like if we are to do anything, we can only deal with the things that we are responsible for, but what happens here. maybe that's what we should be drilling down on. That's how we should split these figures up, so we can look into that. Thank you, Chair.
Gordon, thank you, Barry.
Yeah, we've had these broad categories for a number of years, and I think that's probably sensible in terms of reporting, because there's a lot you can split into so many different subcategories. There's so many different illnesses and ailments, etc. It's not until you get into the individual cases that you really understand why somebody is off, or the core reason why somebody's off, with stress, with mental health challenges, with depression. And we did a little bit of work a few years ago with I think it was adults and children's social work teams, so people who'd been off stress, mental health, depression, and what came back, it was very much a mix. And sometimes one was bleeding of home and work, and sometimes one was bleeding, and very often one was bleeding into the other. So it's often not as straightforward to say I am simply off because something has happened at work, or I'm overworked, therefore I'm stressed, I'm off. There are often many other complex reasons as well, and we certainly have put training in place in the past. We've got general absence management training in for managers, and we've done some specific training as well for having difficult conversations, understanding mental health, and being able to address sensitively those sorts of challenging, or could be challenging, conversations. But you're absolutely right. And when we get to Colin's report, what we're trying to do is there's some reactive stuff we do around wellbeing. We have a counselling service, but there's also kind of proactive, promoting good mental health, good physical health, etc. And you've got a public health report coming later in the agenda. A colleague from public health will talk through that, and it's very much around community, but we can turn that into actually health of our workforce as well. So how can we impact? Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you want to.
Please, thank you, Gordon. No, it was just a specific piece of work that came out of that survey with children and adults was really insightful. So one of the big themes that came out of that piece of deep dive work into mental health with children and adults was the impact of bereavement on people's mental health. And actually that bereavements, obviously at the time people have a bereavement, but actually the impact that can have on people's long-term mental health. It's not an event that just happens and then a couple of weeks later, it doesn't impact on you. Actually, we were having people going in and out of the wellbeing service with long-term impacts. And actually, it was impacting on them in work, in their personal lives, etc. And actually, what we felt we needed to do was have a much greater wellbeing offer around bereavement. And out of that, our wellbeing service went away, and they developed some specific skills around bereavement. Obviously, as one-to-one counsellors, they've got those skills, but what they've put in place is actually some bereavement support groups, which are actually open to all members of the council. They're facilitated groups, but actually where people can go and I've not been myself, it's not something that I've needed to access, but my understanding is that where people can actually go and get that peer support facilitated by a counsellor and actually have that on a regular basis. And my understanding is that those have been really successful. So actually helping people with some real practical things. So that's the kind of interventions that we want to be able to do. We're not trying to fix people, we're trying to help people and support people cope with the things that are in their lives that helps them be able to operate in their world, in their job more effectively. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. It's interesting. If I look at, my view on it, I think the breakdown of the 26.2%, I think your point's quite right. And if there's things there that we can implement that makes it easier and reduces that figure. I mean, overall for the council, it's a £5.1 million cost, and it's also 9% of our staff that aren't available to do the jobs that we need to do. And obviously, in the times of sort of constraint and financial pressures we've got, we need everyone there to be doing the job to allow us to sort of operate properly across all of our departments. COVID 10%. Do you break that down by long COVID and short COVID? Is that a figure that you can give us at a future meeting? It just seems high for 10%. I mean, I know COVID's still out there and we're still coping with it, but I just wondered if you break it down from a long stroke.
I believe we've made a decision not to formally monitor it now, so that's going to become a historic figure.
Okay.
Because obviously people aren't testing. That's I think that's where you got to with CMT. We were kind of monitoring. I'm not sure we were able to break it. We knew of some long COVID cases, but I'm not sure we were monitoring at that point in terms of having COVID and then long-term COVID. We had some very difficult, complex long-term cases, but I think that figure will gradually reduce as we turn over each quarter now.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can just say, what I've started doing for CMT is I've been obviously it depends how the manager records it. Obviously, some people will present and say, I've got COVID. They've done a home test. They know it is. Other people might have COVID, but they haven't, and they'll say it's a cough, cold, flu. So what I've been doing for CMT is I've provided the 2 cough, cold, flu and COVID categories, but then I've also provided it as a combined figure so we can see it as a combined figure. So with your agreement, I can start doing that for committee as well, because that seemed like a sensible way forward, given we're not in a testing situation anymore.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the policy that you send it, it's there and it's managed. It provides rigor to the system. But I think the comment you made, we had benchmarking comparisons. I think that's always useful, so we do know where we are. I understand Richard's frustrations from the fact that he's been on this committee for a long time, and you almost sort of, when you used to employ, there used to be the old saying that as long as you don't have any more than 10 days off, you're normally okay on the sick, and it's part of your policy, and we work with it. And we're at nine sort of days sort of average per person across the county, and it's that isn't what we want to see. We want people to be happy in their work and work all the days and have the holidays they're entitled to, so without any sick. Just out of interest, do you overlay the working from home? Do you have a comparison of people who are in the office being sick and then people who are working from home being sick? Is there any measurement done on that? Because obviously, in theory, we're now integrating and coming back into the office. I know we've still got the transforming the ways of work, and I know that that's something that you're heavily involved with. But
I mean, we've had conversations around the positive impact of ways of working in terms of I'm not well enough to come into the office, nor should I come in because I may spread something. I'm not too ill to work from home. Those sorts of conversations. I think the only way we could do it would be to look at, and this is a bit arbitrary, but to look at, you've got, it's table 14 as a service level data. You could start to pick out some of those services who don't, they're frontline, so they don't benefit from working from home because they're frontline, they're at work, out in the community or in an office the whole time, versus other services who are working, in a hybrid, flexible way. So you could start to kind of highlight those and see whether there's any differences between them. But there are lots of other reasons as well.
Okay.
Lots of other reasons why, in terms of the type of work, the stress, the workloads, the just working closely in kind of a personal service or a frontline service, picking up germs, etc. There's lots of factors to consider.
Okay. Just one last one for me before I go to Richard. Richard's got a final point. Maternity and paternity, presumably that's covered elsewhere. That's not classed as things, but do we collect data on that? Is that becoming more prevalent? Because obviously, paternity became something that was available. Have we seen that build across our workforce? Just a curious one as an aside to this, really. I accept it's not part of this agenda item, but and maternity, is it
well, the policy is very, very clear about what our term and condition is in terms of paternity and maternity leave. if somebody, for example, is pregnant and is at work and then is sick, then it is treated as sickness.
Right.
If that helps in
Okay.
terms of sort of categorising the two areas. So the policies are very clear in terms of how we record that information. Is it discounted, Andrea? It's not discounted in terms of the figures, but the conversations with that individual at the trigger point interviews may be somewhat different because they are pregnant, let's say. And if it's pregnancy related, and that's the issue, that the individual has to be very clear, or their GP on the sick note has to be very clear as to whether or not it's a pregnancy related reason why they are off on work on sickness absence compared to somebody being pregnant and having a cough and cold. So again, we do capture that at a local level.
All right, just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Richard, final point.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just clarify something through you with Gordon, if I may? Gordon referred to Kent. Could I first of all just check, do Kent, like ourselves, follow the Green Book code for conditions of service? So no difference there. So my question is, I know rather simplistic, but it is this really. Why is Kent's hard work paying off, and our hard work isn't paying off?
Thank you. First of all, my understanding is yes, they follow the Green Book, so 6 months full, 6 months half, and the same sick pay arrangements. We do see, I mean, taking it out of Kent for a second, we do see differences between authorities in terms of sickness levels. One issue can be, and this is not making excuses because we need to manage it across all services, but some authorities have different services in-house or different services outsourced who perhaps traditionally have higher levels of sickness. That's not excusable. It's not a reason. We still need to manage sickness across all services, but you do see some differences sometimes because of the types of services that are managed in or out. And I know Kent have a lot of outsourced services. They've got a commercial services as a large company for outsourced services. I can't remember what's in there. Organizational culture, clear expectations from members, from leadership, management, etc. Clearly communicated messages. There's a lot that we talked about in the past that goes to make up the kind of culture and expectation. And again, I haven't dipped into the detail with a colleague from Kent around, how they approach it. We'll all have similar policies because you all tend to have the same stages in your policies. So some similarities, but again, some organisational level differences as well, I think, between authorities.
Question lingering in my mind then, Chairman, is can we re-identify in what way Kent differs from ourselves, which may explain this difference? Because I think it's an important point Gordon has made. He's final authority with a better record than us. Both them and us apparently working hard on this. And my simple question is, can we identify why their hard work is paying off and ours isn't in the same way paying off? We may not be comparing the same thing, and there may be differences between the authorities in terms of outsourcing, which may be influential, I don't know. But I just feel I want to know the answer to that question, as Gordon has mentioned again.
I will have a look and see what the core spending power figure is, because they may sit as a much wealthier authority, and they may well not have the pressures that we have to go through year after year after year with our constant sort of strive to sort of break even and sort of with the lack of funding as the lowest authority. So I will try and find that before the end of the
And I'm happy to have a further, slightly deeper conversation. Yeah, that's not a problem at all.
All right, thank you. Okay, following that, we're asked to note the update provided on the Council's overall position on sickness absence as at the end of March 2023. I think we've had a good discussion, and thank you for everything for that. So does everyone agree? Okay, thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is update on wellbeing on pages 15 to 18 of your agenda packs. Good morning, Colin, who's our Health and Safety and Wellbeing Manager, and you're going to present the report. So over to yourself, Colin.
Good morning and thank you. The purpose of the report is to update the Employment Committee on the approach being taken to staff wellbeing. The council for many years had a comprehensive wellbeing offer. It is supported this by this positive feedback we have from staff surveys. We're always looking at maintaining it and improving it and moving it forward with the various aspects. For example, the cost of living crisis that people are experiencing now is impacting on people's mental health as well. The current approach, supporting staff in respect of positive wellbeing, but also to help manage poor mental health and wellbeing, is set out in the People Strategy, which has previously been submitted to this committee. We have a wealth of positive interventions and support mechanisms for our staff, and that also includes the mental health first aiders, as well as our in-house counselling service. And in addition to that, from the themes that have come out of the wellbeing service, we've also developed an intranet where there's a significant amount of self-help packages available to support our staff. We've recently started an Officer Wellbeing Board, which is made up of several cross-departmental and all the various committees that the council have for the staff members, targeting really to make sure that our offer remains relevant to the needs of our staff. So we are updating and regularly update our wellbeing approach. All departments work hand in glove with us on this, and it is a county-wide issue. Some of the key factors and topics that we have is listed in this short report. And for example, improving the quality of our appraisal one-to-ones and understanding our staff and talking to our staff is really, really important. We are constantly endeavouring to build a very positive wellbeing culture. We have I believe there's some good management processing for stress, which is a topic that you've in the previous paper you've literally been just discussing, and it is a theme that comes out of the counselling and wellbeing sessions that we do. So we have set some improvements to support that, and we have some specialist topics around depression, anxiety, bereavement, and suicide and stress. So that all falls into the background information of self-support also. We've recently signed up to the Able Futures, which is a free service for staff who may be struggling with their mental health or having difficulties that affect their time at work. Now, this is a government-sponsored scheme, and it gives some coaching and support on vocational rehab from some vocational rehabilitation consultants. We've launched an app-based solution for the wage stream, which provides a facility for advice for some good financial management. And we continue to support the Cycle at Work scheme because the link between physical health and mental health is critically important. We actively contribute and promote the national wellbeing campaigns. So, for example, we're taking part in National Smile Month, alcohol awareness, and breast cancers awareness. So we've established that there are no resource implications to this report and this work, as it's predominantly undertaken through volunteers as part of our roles. And I recommend this short report to the committee.
Thank you, Colin. Do any members have any questions or any comments on what we've just had from Colin? No, it looks like a happy committee, Colin. So I'll just say thank you for the report. I thought it's so. Thank you for that. There are no questions. So with that, we are asked to note the contents of the report and the work being done. So please keep up the good work. It is noted, and obviously that's in support of staff wellbeing. So everyone happy, and does everyone agree? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for your attendance. Thank you. Item 11 on the agenda is a report on health in all policies. This is on page 19 to 22 of your agenda packs. Gordon is going to introduce the item before handing over to Kelly Marie Evans. Good morning, Kelly. Consultant in public health, who will deliver the presentation, and following the presentation we can have a discussion. So over to yourself, Gordon.
Yeah, in some ways, all I was going to do is make the link back to the previous conversations we've had this morning. So, in terms of the report that you've got, and I think you've got a presentation as well. Yeah. It very much looking outwardly, but as ever, the advantage of having public health colleagues in the authority is we can look at what are the implications for our workforce as well. So there's a kind of a relevant link back to employment committee. So when we're if we're bringing reports to this committee, actually what are the health implications, so we can look at that not just through the attendance management one. So over to you.
Okay.
All right, shall I start? Because most of the content's in the report anyway. I'm just trying to
We're
create
familiar.
something
Yeah.
slightly visual. So yeah, the next one. Is maybe then I can. I'll put it on my screen. So yeah, as Gordon was saying, it's trying to create a systematic approach to consider health through any decisions or policies that we create as the county council to affect something called the wider determinant. So yes, people, if they become ill, will need NHS services, but actually some of those things that are making them ill are actually what we refer to as the causes. So like it is, if they're in employment or unemployed, the education that they have, the social area that they live in, and that environment that they live in. So it's just really to consider that as part of any decision or policy that we might put in place. So sorry, yeah, and the one after, if that's okay. So it's an internationally known, I guess, term, health and all policies, and we've just been looking locally at how might we embed that across Leicestershire. And we've taken some of the best practice around other areas have done it. So the Health Foundation, the RGA, Public Health England have all made decisions on what we need to make it work, basically. So it is a cross-sector approach to look at how we might maximise health benefits of any policy that we've made or minimise any harms that policy might have in place. So yeah, if you're right to go to the next one. So what does that mean for Leicestershire? So we have tried to create a systematic approach. So there is online a form that would take people through kind of like what they might consider about what their decisional policy is, a governance framework. So we have been through SEG, CMT, all the D&Ts and asked the directors of each of those to support us. And we've created, sorry, it goes to the next one, tools for staff to increase awareness around how health might impact each of the different directors that they work in. So hopefully demonstrating the benefits to what the area that they're working on and how we might consider health, because as we know, people in poor health don't contribute to the economy, but also don't contribute to the areas that they live in. So we really want to just make sure we're addressing or considering health in whatever we do, basically. So yeah, as I said, we've created this form that takes people through a series of questions to make a consideration of how health might impact what the piece of work that they're doing. And then as, don't know if you did say this actually, Gordon, I think you might have done. And then on any cabinet paper or scrutiny paper, there was just a section for health to be considered and any recommendations or what they've done to mitigate any health harms or promote any health benefits. So my last couple of slides, I'll just show the tools. So we've called it Health in All Our Work. It's an e-learning course for all staff, so they can just briefed around how health might impact what their areas of work that they're leading on. There's a how-to guide about how to fill in the form, and then there's a web page. So if anyone wants any additional support, then those tools exist. And then from an employee wellbeing perspective, we've just picked out some. So it will increase, hopefully, organisation awareness around the work they're doing. That's fine. The work they're doing and looking at it through the lens of health. So they're looking at it from multiple, I guess, perspectives, help promote health throughout the departments, and increase an understanding of actually what shapes health. So not necessarily being in ill health, but actually the area a person lives and what opportunities that they have also will impact the health that they and their peers and families and communities have. So that's all I was going to say. If anyone's got any.
Okay, before I open it, I mean, my comment is, will this be, I mean, your tiered training, I think, is excellent. And I think that staff need to be aware of that. So it's good to see that in there. Your reform, will it be a respective process to everything we do? Or will it just be for things going forward? So are you looking back at all our process to say, right, how does health affect that? We're now going to add that and bring that forward as a refresh, or?
I think we'll start from going forward rather than retrospectively. Okay. Although we have kind of created a mechanism to enable us to pull out themes.
Yeah.
So it might be as we go through and get a couple of these in that we can look at themes and maybe work with particular departments and to say these are some things that are coming out of the decisions that we've made and escalate as appropriate. So others are more aware of kind of like, I guess, the multiple impacts that we might be having.
Yeah. I mean, our last report looked at 44,000 days of sickness that we have as a local authority, and obviously this is something that, may sort of impact it. It may help sort of going forward. So that would be a comment I would make. I mean, certainly Special Cabinet Group looked at this, and I think we were fully supportive, and we see the benefits it brings. So, one last question for myself before I open it up is the public health grant. Are you expected to take this out of that, or have the government acknowledged this is needed and they've given you additional funding to allow you to do it, or is it?
This is coming out the public health grant.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There's a lady called Natalie Howden that's leading on it.
Yeah.
And she will be at the end of an email or pick up the phone if anyone needs any support to complete it. So
good. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, Barry?
Just a quick one on the health impact e-form. Quite useful if we just got a picture view of that. That was sent round to us.
Yeah, sure.
Just so we understand what we're asking.
Yeah, absolutely. We've written a few papers. There was one with a link in, but I can't remember which page. But I can definitely.
Or a link in it. Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, that'd be great. Just so we can see what we're asking. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from any other members? No. Okay. Gordon?
Just spurred a thought, again, links back to previous conversations, but we've got a whole organisation staff survey live at the moment, but later in the year, and I'm trying to remember the title of it, there's a wider survey that goes out to the community that we'll take part in. Is it lifestyles, or it's one that Mel leads on?
Okay. Yeah.
But effectively, organisations, staff can complete it. It's very much around aspects of lifestyle, but it will pick up well-being at work as well, and factors relating to well-being. So we've got a couple of very brief questions in our staff survey. That wider survey will go into a little bit more detail around well-being. So we'll get some good data. I think we did it once just before the pandemic, and then didn't have the ability to obviously take things forward, but that'll give us some good data that will inform the wellbeing action plan, the strategy Colin was talking about. So there's a good link between items today.
All right, good. Okay. Oh, Richard, yeah.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent approach. Thank you very much indeed. Picking up a point that Barry made in an earlier conversation, if I may, and it may be hard to measure this really, but do you think we could all reasonably expect to see the benefits of this policy feeding through in improved attendance by staff, improved health, identifying particularly, Barry mentioned things that we can influence at work, which may affect people's mental or physical health. Do you think this will help to identify anything which, as Barry pointed out in an earlier conversation, we can positively influence as an authority or as a committee?
We can definitely try. I guess at the moment it's not mandated, so we need to, I think that's why we're trying to collate almost who is completing it and what some of the trends are that are coming through the impact assessments. But yeah, I guess linking to what Gordon said, if we do have a baseline understanding of staff wellbeing, and then an understanding of any policy decision we've made and tried to mitigate any health impact of, then I don't think it'd be particularly quick to do, but over time, in theory, I would have thought we should be able to see, well, this is what our staff health or employee wellbeing was like. These are the actions we've taken, and this is how we've tried to mitigate any health harms. And therefore, thank you. Causation, but there's definitely an association, I would have thought.
Okay, thank you. We are asked to note the approach outlined with the report to embed health in all our policies across Leicestershire and all county council activity. Does everyone agree? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kelly Marie. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Next item is item 12, which is a report on performance and productivity on pages 23 to 28 of your agenda packs. Again, Andrea is going to present this report. So, Andrea, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update the committee on the progress made of the Performance and Productivity Project, which is within the performance management stream of the People Strategy. The project sits within the performance management work stream of the People Strategy, which aims to support specific outcomes. Managers are able to drive performance by having a clear understanding of what they do, supported by a robust framework, tools and network that are future proof. So that's where my project sits within the wider People Strategy. My understanding is that there was an update on the People Strategy to Employment Committee in May, and it was approved in February 21. There is also alignment with ways of working, which will hopefully become clearer as I go through the report, which is a programme which I'm sure you're all aware of, which aims to drive efficiency and productivity by promoting a culture of flexibility and smarter working, enabled by new technology. And the Employment Committee received an update on the Ways of Working programme in February last year, and the Scrutiny Task and Finish group met in December 22 and received an update then. So obviously there's various different things that all connect together. So in terms of the background, the performance and productivity of the workforce is critical to ensure the best use of the council's resources, regardless of where they carry them out. As we know, changes in the way that employees carry out their work across the council have been evolving through the pandemic period and beyond, and this has created a sharp focus on the way that the workforce performance and productivity is managed effectively in a new and ever-changing environment and context. Since COVID and obviously the series of different types of lockdowns that we had, there has been a wider and longer term shift by many employers towards hybrid and remote working. So we are not alone. We are part of the national shift towards the opportunity to invest in new technology, rationalise office space, which obviously we've been doing, and to offer flexible working, creating a wide range of benefits, including positive impact on recruitment and retention. As we know, many people are now looking for what we have on offer when they are looking for new opportunities. It has been and remains essential that we work that working norms and expectations, that the council makes best use of our property assets. As we know, the updates you've had on ways of working is what we've been able to do financially with our property assets, but also in terms of these new ways of working, what we've been able to do in terms of our recruitment and retention offer. People are looking for these ways of working in terms of retention, but also now in terms of what they're looking for when they're looking for new opportunities. So in terms of the project that I'm leading on, the scope of the project is to produce a framework built on existing policies, guidance and practices for all managers to work, and focuses on three key areas. So the first one is managing effective ways of working for team members. So making those new ways of working really effective all of the time on an ongoing basis. Making sure that we identify and monitor key service team performance data indicators, and thirdly, having a managing individual performance through a performance management cycle, which I'll go on to and explain a little bit more in a moment. Taking these together, creating a whole system of performance and productivity. So we've got an assurance process. So as we know, success and managing performance and productivity isn't about doing one thing, just doing that. We need to make sure that we're doing lots of different things together. The framework, which will bring together those tools and signpost managers to information, will use that as a whole system. So going into ways of working, which you'll be very familiar with, has got the people, property and technology, which it aims to drive efficiency and productivity by promoting the culture of flexible working, the new technology. We know that this has been implemented in environment and transport and adults, and the majority of your implementation is taking place in children's in room 600 at the moment. They've all moved in, and the final part of moving them out of their previous locations is underway, so we can reuse that space as we speak. Hybrid working, in a nutshell, offers managers more choice in how they deliver services. The key to ensuring that productivity and performance is central focus is continually reviewing how we use all the different options. So rather than saying, right, well, we'll all work at home or we'll all work in the office, is that we continually look at where's the right place to do particular tasks, what's the right technology, how do we need to work alone? Do we need to work together? What are the right groupings of people, place and technology to get tasks done? It might be that we need to do them effectively in terms of time, but sometimes we might need to do them effectively in a creative way. So it might be that rather than sending lots of emails back and forward to each other, sometimes the most effective way is to get everybody in a room together for an hour, rather than spending a couple of days sending emails back to each other. I'm sure you've all experienced that frustration. So actually, when we talk about productivity and efficiency, it can look very different. So the manager's role, and also individuals, is to identify how to use all of these things, and not to just stick with one method in order to make them all work. So we've got all of these different wonderful pieces of technology. We've got the collaboration spaces for facilitated working group. We've got focused spaces for individual work. Obviously people can work remotely. We've got the ability to work hybrid to reduce mileage. The technology allows us to reduce business support because we can take meeting minutes using the technology. There's all these sorts of things. More automation is coming online all of the time. So we just need to make sure that we are using all of these things as effectively as possible and keeping them under review. The Ways of Working programme has also produced a range of training through our organisational development team, which focuses on developing skills and awareness of maximising productivity, improving collaboration and communication, and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. So making sure that people are using hybrid in a mentally well-being focused way. So hybrid working requires managers to manage by objectives and outputs, which is supported by our approach set out in the Manager's Charter. So all of our supervision, our APR, all of our performance management tools are designed and set up to work by objectives. So what we want people to do is to have an understanding of what they need to achieve and to have that monitored and checked off with their manager through supervisions, through their performance reviews. That's how we should be working, rather than being managed by observation. So actually hybrid working actually really supports that, because managers might not be able to see everything you're doing. You'll be working in different places, you'll be working in different groups. So actually hybrid working really reinforces the use of all of these tools and styles that we've wanted even pre-COVID. So it's actually a really good reinforcement for that. Looking at data, so the second part of this is making sure that we've got performance data, because we need to know what we're actually tasking people to do. And this actually actively in the background, this project is obviously actively working, and we've been doing work on this at the moment. So a key part of managing any service team and individual is identifying, agreeing and monitoring appropriate data metrics. The framework will outline the performance data which all managers will review at corporate level, and also set out requirements for them to review their service, departmental and national indicators. And the results for each area will be a blend of workforce, financial, and in many cases, some areas have national, service and other relevant metrics. We've been going around doing work with departments to learn about how they do this. And actually, they've all got this very well embedded within their services. What we need to do is we need to make sure that this feeds into individual performance management really in a really slick way. Where there isn't this in place, we'll be providing a template for a balanced scorecard. So managers that might feel that they need something to bring that together will provide a template. And then the third part of this, the performance management cycle, is over the last 3 years, with the introduction of the people strategy, a series of projects have been delivered to develop and improve processes around individual performance. So the annual performance review, supervision guidance, the leadership behaviours framework, the manager's charter. What we'll be developing is a cycle which brings all of those together and explains to managers visually and also in words how all of those interlink, but they also interlink with ways of working and also with data, so they understand how they need to use all of those together. And by setting out clear expectations and providing the structure and tools to assure performance and productivity, managers will be in the best position to be able to make optimum use of all of their resources, because obviously we can't produce resources that aren't there, but what we need managers and staff to do is make the very best choices with all of the resources that they have. Indicators of improved productivity. Within the report, I've detailed some feedback from the Room 700 pilot, which has given some information, and also there is some further information in the appendix. But the positive indications from the Room 700 rollout is that in the main, people have found that the use of the new space and technology has enabled them to improve their individual productivity. Obviously, that's just the technology in the space. This is about going that step further and making it a whole system. And as I say, into the appendix is further information. So in summary, the framework will as we develop it within this project, we'll set out a whole systems approach to performance management using the new ways of working, data metrics and performance management tools. So it's a continuous management of performance management and productivity. The project is currently in the development stages. We've done work on the ways of working and the data collection, and we're currently working on the third stage, which is the cycle. That's the current stage of the project at the moment. We are looking to launch the framework and supporting guidance in the summer of this year, following all of the relevant support and checks. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I think it's probably appropriate. I don't know whether Peter, you want to comment. You're obviously lead member for transformation and ways of working, so obviously you're a member of the committee. So
the report came to Scrutiny Commission, was it about 6 weeks ago or so? So a very similar report in terms of the kind of outputs from that, the productivity elements that you mentioned in here. I think I'm most interested in the summer when we roll out this new framework in terms of looking at balanced scorecard across the different departments and how we can get to the granularity of performance management and making sure that we are still delivering top services for residents. I think that's really, really important, and an important plank of basically the programme, making sure that we are still delivering the services despite moving to a more agile way of working. So no, I absolutely welcome the report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members? Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I'd I'm quite interested in the sentence that's on page 25, indicators and improved production, on paragraph 18, feedback from room 700 pilot of workspace. So how did you monitor? Was it just a questionnaire to the staff and saying, do you think you've worked harder? And I'm interested in that 7% said no. Yeah, so if it's just a questionnaire to say, have you worked harder because everywhere looks nicer? I'm going to say, well, yes, because I wouldn't want to have a negative view on it. 7% have, but how are we going to measure that in the future? The increased, increased productivity.
Yeah, the survey was a questionnaire, and I think that I can't remember the exact wording, but it wasn't about working harder. It was very much about, we've got new arrangements and collaborative workspaces in the office environment. You have the ability to work remotely as well. So as Andrea described, hybrid working. Has the culmination of that made you more productive? The subtext of that is, are you saving time by not traveling? Are you more efficient in meetings because you can be more focused in a Teams meeting? You're more focused when you get together with people face to face, etc. So it's, I see what you're saying around working harder, because that's almost an implication that achieves productivity, but it was very much around, have the working arrangements enabled you to increase your productivity? I'll give you a different example. When adults rolled out their target operating model, the work they did with New Europe, the social work team, who, by working in different ways, the team manager was able to increase the caseload of each social worker by one case, without people doing anything extra, without going into overtime, additional hours, etc. So because they were working more efficiently, because of the tone work, they were able to absorb more, so they became more productive. So this was asking people individually, and yes, okay, 7% said no, it didn't quite work for us. That's fine. You can sit down with that 7% and say, well, how can we change the arrangements? How can you work more effectively with your colleagues, with your manager? Have we had the right conversations? What is it about hybrid working that isn't working for you? And
would that have been done?
Yes, it was, absolutely. And actually, as we roll this out, I've said this to managers right from the start. Try things. You're not going to get it right first time necessarily, but keep trying different models, and work out what works for you and your service and your customers, because all our services are different, and therefore the operating model becomes different as well.
Scott, who is our project manager, who is listening into this meeting, has sent me a message on instant messaging. So just to add to that, if I may, survey our staff to quantify the impact, not just are you more productive. Where they said less, we have intervened with those managers and supported to understand the reason. Some resulted in office changes around noise, some around managers asking them to come in all the time. So thank you, David, wherever you are, listening into this meeting. So hopefully that just stacks up. Thank you.
Thank you. I know in room 600, the acoustics was a big issue there, and it's probably got a knock-on effect to other rooms as well, that the acoustics do need looking into.
It's always good to know that we have listeners on the live stream. So yes, please stay with us. Please stay with us. It helps the figures, so it's okay. Could I just ask? I mean, I think the appendix, the ways of working for 700. I mean, to me, 600 is now going. Do you have plans to do rooms 100 up to 500 as well? Are we going to roll this out and make that happen? The only other comment was, you talk about the reduced costs and obviously, you know, kind of less mileage for individuals. Some won't have paid mileage to sort of within their job anyway. So it's that saving to themselves personally, but it's like carbon footprint. Are you measuring that as well as part of what this is doing and how it's helping County Council achieve its goals?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of the first point, what we're doing is doing this area by area and making sure that we've embedded. So we'll make sure that we've embedded room 600, staff in room 600. That allows us, excuse me, to free up room 500, for example. And we may be leasing that. And then we move on to the next areas of the campus. In terms of reduced costs, you're right. It's not just lower business mileage, although that's a big factor in our projected savings. And we're finding ways of measuring the sort of reduced carbon footprint as well. So that's, again, part of our environment transport colleagues are for obvious reasons, interested in that.
Okay, thank you. That's really good. Thank you. Okay, there's no other questions. So we're asked to note the contents of this report. So does everybody agree? Happy to do that? Okay, thank you. Next, item 13 on the agenda today is a report on the Chief Officer Pay Award 23-24. This is on pages 29 and 30 of the agenda packs, and Gordon is going to present the report.
A very brief report. Backdrop is we have different negotiating bodies for different staff groups, and we're part of the national negotiating machinery as an authority. The employers made offers to the different negotiating bodies earlier in the year. The Joint National Council for Chief Officers has accepted the offer of 3.5%. And in order for us to implement this, backdated to the 1st of April, just seeking the committee's agreement in the usual way. Before you respond to that, it might be worth just painting the slightly wider picture of what's happening around pay. I think I've done that before with other reports. So NJC, National Joint Council, which for us is grades 2 to 17. You're probably aware and seen the press, but Unison have just launched a strike ballot, and that ballot will run until the 4th of July. If they get the mandate for strike action, and I'll come back to what that might look like, that could happen between September and January. So I suppose the simple message is if they get a mandate for strike action, we're kind of in this for the long haul. You know, we'll be up to nearly a year. And instead of a sort of national response, they're looking at what's called disaggregated action. So therefore, employer by employer. So if they get a mandate from one employer for strike action, you could see, you know, and not in others, you could see strike action in different parts of the county, schools, us, districts, etc. But strike action in different parts of the country as well. And GMB and Unite conducted consultative ballots, both rejected the offer, and I believe they're both balloting. I can't remember the timescales, but they're both balloting around industrial action as well. So I think when we wrote this report, inflation was still sitting at about 10%. Obviously, it has reduced slightly. But people will be voting in the context of high cost of living, inflation still running high, other public sector bodies striking, lots of press at the moment. So it will be interesting to see what happens. We'll keep you updated.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. Members, any questions? No? Okay, we're asked to approve the implementation of the JNC pay awards for employees on grades 18 to 21. Does everybody agree? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Final report today is on organisational change policy and procedure action plans. This can be found on pages 31 to 36 of the agenda packs. Damien Buckley, our Democratic Services Officer, will present this report. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standing item that comes to each employment committee, and it just outlines the ongoing and completed action plans that are going on currently.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Obviously, we're just asked to sort of note the current action plans which contain provision for compulsory redundancy and details of the progress. So everyone agree? No comments or questions? Okay, thank you. So item 15, any other items as urgent? There are none, as I mentioned earlier. So date of future meetings. The next meeting of this committee is scheduled to be held on the 28th of September 2023. And obviously we've also had the meetings of the committee in 2024 scheduled at 10 o'clock as per the agenda that you have. So can I thank Andrea, Caroline, Gordon, Colin and Kelly Marie for their reports today. Can I thank Brenda for stepping in onto committee today? Hope she's found it useful and informative. And finally, can I thank Damien and Ewan as well for being with us and looking after us. So I'll now close the meeting. Thank you all.